We've finally got eyes on a complete version 3 Super Heavy booster, which has already set records at the test site. The record in question, though, is the fastest time from rollout to testing destruction. In the space of 2 days, SpaceX has gone from debuting the latest and greatest in first stage performance to scrapping the new shiny machine. We'll take a deep look into what happened, how they're safing the booster, and what this means for Starship Flight 12. But don't worry, we do have some positive news with the lift of Pad 2's ship quick disconnect arm, the end of an era at the original Pad 1, and Giga Bay progress in this Starbase update, sponsored by Opera. First this week, let's start over at Massey's, but not with Booster 18. We're actually going to talk about the recovery from the previous vehicle failure, Ship 36. There are many activities taking place with the rebuild of the methane tank farm, work on the 2 test tanks, and other items of interest, including an exciting new development happening at Massey's. Starting at the methane tank farm, we can see that the rebuild following Ship 36's explosion is nearly complete. This includes the 2 older vertical storage tanks along with the larger horizontal storage tanks that feed into a pair of methane pumps. At present, there are only 2 subcoolers connected to this tank farm, with at least 2 more positioned off to the side, set to be connected to the system at a later date. This new tank farm is now being protected by a new blast wall, which is still under construction at the time of writing. Directly behind this wall run the various methane ground support equipment lines into a new propellant trench that also houses the liquid oxygen propellant lines and is routed to the new fluids bunker. Inside the fluids bunker, there is a methane side, an oxygen side, and then high pressure switching in the middle. These then exit the bunker and converge to go to the new and improved ship umbilical service structure and then to the new ship quick disconnect plate. Of course, we don't ever expect this to quickly disconnect during testing, but that's just what it ends up being called. Next to the ship umbilical service structure is the ship static fire stand, which has 6 newly designed Block 3 ship clamps installed on it, and it's worth mentioning that these are positioned slightly differently to the previously installed clamps. The walk-around platforms are also starting to be reinstalled after they were destroyed during the Ship 36 explosion. Another element of the stand that is being worked on, due to the original being badly damaged, is the new work access platform which is being assembled over at Sanchez. This new work platform is twice the thickness of the original. The reason why is hopefully self-explanatory. The oxygen side is now sporting a new set of valve and pump skids which route to 4 subcoolers, which then route into the propellant trench and to the fluids bunker. As seen in the flyover photos, SpaceX seems to be adding another 2 subcoolers to the liquid oxygen side to increase subcooling capacity. With 6 LOX subcoolers and 4 methane subcoolers, SpaceX should have around the same subcooling capacity at Massey's that they have at the new Pad 2 pump farm. This entire system is separate from the cryogenic proofing tank farm that connects into the ship and booster cryogenic stations, as well as the structural test stands. Along with the newly designed fluid systems, there is a new electrical and control bunker next to the fluids bunker, which will provide power and controls to the ship static fire stand and methane tank farm. That is not the only new electrical and control bunker though, as SpaceX is constructing a separate bunker next to the entrance into Massey's, which will support power control for the entire site. Following the Ship 36 explosion, SpaceX was forced to cut power to Massey's and switch to generators, as leaving live, burnt and exposed wiring was highly dangerous for the cleanup and rebuild crew. With the new bunker, SpaceX should have the ability to cut power to certain sections of Massey's if another accident were to occur. Booster 18. Just kidding. Luckily, the accident with Booster 18 is contained to the booster itself, but we'll get to that shortly. We've also spotted a new set of hardware at the base of the ramp leading up to the static fire trench. SpaceX is preparing to build a second static fire stand, affectionately called the Crab Stand, which is likely needed to keep up with operations going forward, as SpaceX is set to greatly increase ship production over time. Having at least 2 stands available for use will help to keep operations flowing smoothly. While one is supporting static fire testing at Massey's, the other could be receiving a ship at the production site, meaning that when it's time to move on to the next test campaign, they can just swap the stands. As for other important matters ongoing at Massey's, there's Booster 18.1 and Booster 18.3. B18.1 is of course the Block 3 booster aft section structural test tank, and is still housed inside the black Super Crusher structural test cage, where it has remained since the 12th of May this year. It hasn't undergone a cryogenic test since the 18th of September, and as mentioned in a previous update, teams have recently been observed adding supports above and below the ports for the 5 pairs of diagonal actuators that have been used to apply side forces to the internal test transfer tube. And as for B18.3, which is the Block 3 booster forward section structural test article, it recently completed a few more cryogenic proof tests on the original Can Crusher test stand, with tests number 6 and 7 occurring on the 16th and 17th respectively. It is unknown how many more cryogenic tests are planned for these test tanks, but currently a total of 17 tests have been performed on both tanks so far. Regarding the structural testing, a second Can Crusher cap has been assembled and is likely to be used on B18.3 or Ship 39.1. As a reminder, S39.1 is the new Block 3 ship aft section structural test article that is currently sitting on the ship cryogenic test stand, as B18.1 is still using the Super Crusher test cage. It seems that SpaceX has had to improvise testing the various Block 3 designs due to how long B18.1 has been residing in the Super Crusher cage. Either way, SpaceX now has a little bit more time on their hands to get as much data as possible out of these test tanks due to Booster 18's anomaly. But first, Sawyer's been surfing the World Wide Web.
Can I just take a moment to thank the writers of this video? I mean, the amount of research that they have to do is incredibly impressive. And with the help of today's video sponsor, Opera, it makes it that much easier to find the right information and find it fast. I personally have been using Opera as my main browser for years. Whenever I'm hosting a launch, I have so many tabs open. Between the company's website, next spaceflight, and the stream itself, it can be a lot. The Tab Islands feature makes it super easy to keep everything grouped together. That way it's quick and easy to separate my launch tabs from my other research and expand and collapse them as needed. Whenever I'm writing videos or articles, the ability to split screen saves me so much time. Instead of having to click between multiple tabs and going back and forth, or even having to use multiple screens, now I simply drag one tab down and that's it. And if I need to check some facts on the fly, I don't even need to leave the stream. With the ability to pop out the video, it's just one press of a button and I can keep watching NSF all the time while I'm working, even outside the browser. Plus, would I really be a space geek if I didn't make my browser space themed? Gotta have some Aurora going. You can choose everything from animated backgrounds, colors, browser sounds, and more. And it's all customizable. I genuinely love this browser and think you will too. Download it today by clicking the link in the description below and up your browsing game. Thanks again to Opera for sponsoring this video.
Enough teasing, let's talk about Booster 18 in depth. It rolled out to Massey's in the early morning hours of Thursday, just 14 days after having its liquid oxygen and liquid methane tanks mated together in Giga Bay 1. This is the quickest SpaceX has ever gone from a full vehicle stack to the start of testing of a booster. Then, on the same day it was rolled to Massey's, crews closed the site and tested Booster 18 throughout the night. That continued until 4:04 and 55 seconds Central Standard Time on Friday morning, when an anomaly occurred during what SpaceX calls a gas system pressure test. This has also been referred to as an ambient temperature pressure test. This anomaly resulted in a large hole being ripped into the side of the liquid oxygen tank on the side opposite the booster quick disconnects. Amazingly, and likely due to the presence of the new large transfer tube and the side tank installed on the quick disconnect side, Booster 18 did not tip over. At the time of recording, it's still upright, and a team has hooked up the Buckner LR11000 crane to Booster 18 via the new remotely controlled Block 3 booster lifter. SpaceX were quick to respond on social media, posting this statement on X about 5 hours after the explosion. They confirmed that this test was not using propellant, only gas, and there were no engines installed, as Booster 18 was sitting on the new Block 3 structural test stand, which uses thrust rams to simulate the force on the aft when loading cryogenic fluids. Most importantly, the site was clear and no one was injured during the accident. As I briefly mentioned before the break, a team has now entered the Massey's test site safely and are working on securing Booster 18 using the Block 3 booster lifter. This was rolled to the Massey's test site on Friday afternoon and attached to the Buckner LR11000 crane. On Saturday evening and even into the night, SpaceX hooked up Booster 18 and cut the methane tank right off the top of the booster. The crane then set it on the ground, while crews cut the methane tank into sections for scrapping. Next comes the liquid oxygen tank, to which crews have hooked up a whiffletree load spreader to help secure the LOX tank for further scrapping operations. It is going to be very interesting to watch SpaceX safely secure and scrap Booster 18 over the coming days. So I know everyone is asking how an anomaly like this even happens. Well, based on the pictures and the location of the rupture, it appears to have originated at one of the larger chines which house several COPVs. Yep, our good old friends from June may have struck once again. For those who are unfamiliar with the terminology, COPVs are composite overwrapped pressure vessels. These are tanks designed to hold gas or fluid at high pressures, usually made of a titanium inner sleeve wrapped in carbon composite fibers for extra strength. For super heavy, they hold things like nitrogen for actuating pneumatic valves and for spin starting the Raptor engines, as well as oxygen and methane gas for the torch igniters, which are used to ignite and start the Raptor engines. If you want to learn more about that process, we have an excellent Raptor deep dive, which you can watch after this. These are usually kept at very high pressures, orders of magnitude higher than the pressure at sea level, so if one of them were to burst, it would be like setting off a grenade with high velocity carbon fiber shrapnel flying everywhere. As I alluded to, SpaceX has suffered from exploding COPVs on more than one occasion. Falcon 9 missions CRS-7 and Amos-6 saw COPVs rupture in the second stage. This led to CRS-7 being lost in flight and Amos-6 being lost on the pad. In the case of Starship, this happened to Ship 36 at Massey's just 5 months and 3 days before the anomaly with Booster 18. Ship 36's anomaly occurred during an attempted 6-engine static fire, which resulted in a large fireball and required Massey's to be rebuilt, as we explained earlier. Based on the pictures and the location of the failure on Booster 18, it appears that a COPV failed under this larger chine, which then cascaded to the rest of the COPVs housed within that chine. These explosions would have then weakened and blown holes into the liquid oxygen tank, which was being pressurized during this test. So, when the holes were created in the tank by the COPV, the pressure inside the tank burst out, ripping an even larger hole in the LOX tank. This hole covers over half of the LOX tank, and as mentioned earlier, it is remarkable that the booster did not tip over, but is instead being supported by the new larger transfer tube and likely aided by the new side tank, which has struts securing it to the LOX tank walls. The second question everyone is asking is, how does a COPV explode again? SpaceX literally said they had made modifications to their workflow following the Ship 36 explosion. Well, we can only speculate. It could have been the COPV itself that was at fault, or another failure somewhere else on the booster, or even something groundside that caused this failure. Either way, SpaceX once again has their work cut out to investigate this failure and push forward towards the next booster. With the failure of Booster 18, the question isn't if Flight 12 will be delayed, the question is by how much. Currently, Booster 19 only exists as individual sections sitting in the Star Factory, as stacking of the booster is yet to begin. Even if SpaceX were to start stacking Booster 19 within the next week, the earliest timeline for readiness for cryogenic proof testing based on Booster 18 could be the end of January. This projected timeline, however, does not include SpaceX learning from building Booster 18 and being able to construct Booster 19 at a faster pace, nor the time needed for SpaceX to conduct an investigation, develop proper fixes, and implement them on Booster 19. SpaceX, however, thinks they can do it even faster. Quote, the Starbase team plans to have the next Super Heavy booster stacked in December, which puts it on pace with the test schedule planned for the first Starship V3 vehicle and associated ground systems. Starship's 12th flight test remains targeted for the first quarter of 2026. It will be interesting to see if SpaceX can set a more positive record and stack a booster within a month. The quickest they have ever stacked a vehicle and prepared it for testing is Booster 18 at 2 months, not including the wait for the aft section. It is a shame though that Booster 18 will never receive the chilly cryogenic propellant, because it could have kept itself warm with one of our brand new knitted Christmas sweaters at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Or perhaps it could have kept its integrated hot staging ring warm with a knitted holiday beanie. One thing's for certain though, it can definitely keep itself busy during the scrapping process with one of the new puzzles, and it can easily pick some holiday gifts for its colleagues at the dedicated tab at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. There is another issue concerning the loss of Booster 18. SpaceX now has no means to fully commission Pad 2. There are no boosters available to be placed on Pad 2 and filled with propellants to test the new tank farm and loading procedures. This might be addressed by modifying B18.1, which is a Block 3 booster aft section structural test tank, to use the quick disconnect place at the launch site. Although it would not be a proper test of the system without a full booster to fill, and B18.1 cannot be used for static fire testing of Raptor 3 engines. Overall, SpaceX is now in a bit of a pickle regarding Block 3 testing and Pad 2 commissioning, and any internal launch date for Flight 12 that SpaceX may have had is likely to be delayed due to the loss of Booster 18. Now, with the discussion of the anomaly out of the way, let's talk about all the really impressive changes with Booster 18 and Block 3 boosters compared to Block 2. The explosion might be a downer, but come on, let's geek out about this awesome machine. First off, we can see the new booster integrated hot stage truss and the newly mapped shielding installed on the forward dome, which is used to protect the dome during hot staging. This shielding consists of formed steel plates layered and placed on the areas of the dome where the engine exhaust will make the most contact. Just below the hot stage truss are the 3 new grid fin sockets recessed into the methane tank. These will house the 3 newer and larger grid fins for Block 3 of the booster. 2 of these will be fitted with lift and catch points so that SpaceX can catch using the grid fins themselves rather than relying on a separate pin system. As we move down Booster 18, we can see that SpaceX has switched to a single, slightly wider pipe and inlet for the methane tank's autogenous gas used for tank pressurization. This is to help simplify the pressurization system and reduce the number of parts required. Going even further down, we can see that the common dome has been moved up on the booster, meaning the liquid oxygen tank is now larger and the methane tank smaller. This will likely change with Block 4 once SpaceX is able to build taller boosters using the Giga Bay. However, with the Mega Bays, they are limited in height due to the size of the bays and their doors. For Block 3, this dictates the overall height of the booster and the size of the tanks. Moving down the booster to the liquid oxygen tank, we can see only a single autogenous pressurization line, positioned opposite the methane pressurization line. Once again, this reflects SpaceX's consolidation of parts on the newly designed booster. Continuing down the liquid oxygen tank, there are still 4 chines, but 2 are considerably larger than the others. The 2 larger chines are positioned closer together on the leeward side of the vehicle, while the 2 smaller ones are located further apart, either side of the new quick disconnect panels. Speaking of quick disconnects, Booster 18 and the Block 3 design now feature 2 quick disconnects instead of 1. One is for liquid oxygen, the other for liquid methane, and these have pressure lines that split off into the now exposed gas manifolds installed around the outside of the booster. With no more engine shielding and to minimise the lines inside the booster aft section, the engine spin start, igniter gas and autogenous gas manifolds are now routed around the outside of the booster aft section and connect through the engine junction boxes. These then go into the tank and go to their respective engines for spin start and supplying the igniters. There are numerous other changes that would take literally hours to cover. Suffice to say, SpaceX has devoted considerable time and effort into this booster redesign. It is unfortunate that the first Block 3 suffered an anomaly, rendering it unusable, but as SpaceX has stated previously, this is exactly why they conduct testing. Regarding the other components that must be completed before Flight 12, both Ship 39 and Pad 2 are progressing well and will now benefit from additional time to be finalised and tested. As mentioned last week, Ship 39 completed stacking, and this week it was moved to the central workstation in Mega Bay 2. The next task is to finish its construction ahead of a cryogenic proof test. This includes installing the raceways, tank pressurization lines, completing the heat shield, and fitting numerous valves and assorted components. SpaceX has a fair amount of time to complete all this because, as mentioned earlier, the ship cryothrust simulator stand is currently occupied by S39.1, the ship aft test tank, which also may be slated to use the new can crusher cap at Massey's. It is unclear how long testing with this will take, but if B18.1 and B18.3 are anything to go by, it could be a matter of several months at the very least. We'll just have to wait and see how long it takes to test the new Block 3 ship aft section design. The reason for testing it is because SpaceX has lowered the aft dome of the ship by about 1.1 meters or so. This means the power heads of the Raptor vacuum engines will be slightly inset into the LOX tank, similar to how the grid fin controls are inset into the booster methane tank. Another item related to Block 3 of Starship currently under construction is at Sanchez. This is a newly designed ship transport stand that should be able to be bolted to the SPMTs, rather than chained down as has been the case for the past 5 years. This upgrade is a much needed change to help speed up operations when transporting ships around Starbase and eventually to the Kennedy Space Center. As we can see, this new stand is much more robust than the older tubular steel stands and will allow for the use of fewer counterweights since the stand itself is heavier. The last vehicle-related hardware making great progress is Raptor 3. At McGregor, serial numbers 65, 66, 67 and 68 were all spotted together on a trailer. This was followed a few days later by another 3 Raptor 3 engines on a trailer, although unfortunately we did not get to see the serial numbers on those engines. This is a promising sign that SpaceX is ramping up production and qualification testing of Raptor 3 so that it is ready for Flight 12 and beyond. I suppose one benefit of losing Booster 18 is that 33 Raptor engines have just suddenly become available for reassignment. We had another record set this week, much more positive than B18's, as one of the Raptor vertical test stands recorded a new maximum burn duration of 360 seconds on November 18th. This is 6 minutes, which would nearly cover the ship's ascent burn after stage separation. Last but not least, for the parts that need to be ready for Flight 12 is the Launchpad itself. In that regard, the ship quick disconnect arm was rolled out to the launch site on the night of November 19th. After spending a few days rigging up to the SpaceX LR11000 crane, the SQD arm was lifted onto Pad 2's launch tower. SpaceX used their LR11000 and a secondary crane to lift it off the ground. Then, using pneumatic chain hoists on the LR11000 rigging, it was rotated upright before the secondary crane was disconnected and the arm lifted into place. With this arm now lifted and installed, the SQD arm extension that will house the actual QD plate still needs to be kitted out and lifted as well. This extension is over at Sanchez, near where the first half of the SQD arm was originally built, and will likely be outfitted with all the high pressure and cryogenic pipes along with the QD unit itself before being rolled to the launch site for installation. The design of this QD arm is very different from what has been used on Pad 1 for the last 4 years. The design on Pad 1 had all the propellant lines, high pressure lines, and electrical lines running through the middle of the first part of the QD arm, with basically all the various control panels and valve assemblies situated on the other half of the arm. The new design has many of the GSE lines running over the top of the first half of the QD arm, with most of the various valve assemblies and control panels now situated inside that part of the arm rather than in the other half, thus keeping the majority of the sensitive hardware further away from the engine exhaust plumes during launch. This redesign allows for better access to all the various GSC elements and gives the arm a much cleaner appearance overall, which is all part of SpaceX refining the design of the new launch pad from the original design that was Pad 1. As part of the testing to prepare Pad 2 for Flight 12, SpaceX has carried out multiple methane and oxygen booster quick disconnect retraction tests over the last few days. This is to refine the movements of the control systems ahead of Flight 12's liftoff from Pad 2. As expected, SpaceX has recently removed the back of the LOX BQD hood, likely to install the seal plates, which will help ensure that the mid-hood section is properly aligned with the other hood sections and that there is a tight seal. A similar process will probably soon take place with the methane BQD hood. Lastly, for Pad 2, SpaceX has completed the hold down alignment and load testing using their IB proofing tool, which was built in Sanchez. Over the past 2 weeks, SpaceX has load tested all 20 hold down arms in preparation to eventually receive a booster. And, of course, as we now know, it will be a little while before that happens. Over at the production site, crews are working around the clock to build the Giga Bay. With all 4 tower cranes operating, good progress is being made, but there remains a considerable amount of work to do. Currently, the Starbase Giga Bay stands at only a single column level in height, and will require at least another 8 levels before it reaches its full height. There's also Booster 17, which, after spending 7 months and 4 days in the rocket garden, was rolled into Mega Bay 1 on Wednesday to begin scrapping operations, shortly after Booster 18 departed for Massey's. At the time of writing, only parts of the liquid oxygen tank remain intact, as the aft section was cut off in the late hours of Friday evening. With this booster being scrapped, and Booster 18 now also being scrapped due to its incident, SpaceX only has one fully intact booster left, Booster 12, currently in the rocket garden. This booster is expected to be put on permanent display sometime in the future. With 5 unintentional vehicle losses in 2025, we're still a far cry from the highs of success witnessed on Starship Flight 5, which is of course when Booster 12 made history, being caught in the chopstick arms. Looking over to the village, the main structure for the apartment complex and multi-storey parking garage is now complete, and glass installation is underway on at least one side of the apartment building. Once finished, this will provide accommodation for many SpaceX employees and will greatly increase parking capacity as Starbase continues to expand. That aforementioned historic moment occurred at Pad 1, which is now almost unrecognizable. When we flew over Starbase earlier in the week, there were only 2 launch mount legs left standing, but as of Friday, there were no more legs left. The very last one, the booster quick disconnect leg, was toppled over. This marks the full demolition of the original Starship launch mount after 3.5 years of service and 11 full stack launches. Now comes the much more difficult task of completely removing and destroying the remaining stubs which are sticking out of the ground, followed by the enormous job of removing the 4-meter thick reinforced concrete foundation along with the water-cooled steel plate that is bonded to the concrete slab via steel embeds. Alongside excavating all of that, the vaults containing all the cryogenic lines for the now demolished launch mount must also be removed from the ground. Once these substantial tasks have been completed, SpaceX can then begin installing sheet piles and CFA piles for the new flame trench. As for the other parts of Pad 1, SpaceX has removed both landing rails on the chopsticks and has already shortened the left stick. The process of converting these to the newer design will still require a fair amount of time, as the landing rails must be modified and the newer adjustment screws installed. It is also possible that SpaceX may decide to swap out the stabilization arms on those chopsticks for ones of the same design as the Pad 2 stabilization arms, if deemed necessary. Additionally, almost the entire back of the base of the tower has been removed, as SpaceX appears to be transitioning to the design used at Pad 2. So, even if teams upgrade the sticks, there is currently no hardware in place to move them up and down the tower. As the pad itself continues to be demolished, the detonation suppression system and Fire-X system water storage tanks were removed from the Pad 1 end of the tank farm and transported out of Starbase, likely to either the McGregor test site or possibly to the Cape. We can also see that the entire fluids bunker has been demolished, along with the entire lock side of the Pad 1 end of the tank farm. The methane side only has 2 subcoolers remaining at the time of the flyover. I would have said SpaceX could have sped up demolition by firing a booster against the concrete Flight 1 style, but they don't exactly have a booster to do that with anymore, and don't you dare touch Booster 12, SpaceX. Is their target of completing Booster 19 in December and flying in Q1 next year realistic, or is it too ambitious? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And of course, thanks to Opera for sponsoring this video. Try using the video pop-out player to watch NSF when you have other things to do. NSF not responsible if you watch us at work. You can download Opera using the link in the description. I've been Ryan Caton for NSF, thanks for watching, and goodbye.